Okay, we're continuing our football club history series. We're looking at Brighton and Hove Albion. They are a very interesting club, and their stadium issues in the late 90s to the 2010s are really, really interesting. And they sort of link into the Wimbledon FC story, which obviously splits into MK Dons and AFC Wimbledon. Charlton Athletic have had similar stadium issues in their past. A thing called ground sharing and not having a permanent home. So we'll discuss that later on. But let's look at the history of Brighton and Hove Albion. So their foundation date is the 24th of June 1901, and from foundation until 1920 they are members of the Southern League system. They joined the Football League in 1920. They've been a Football League club ever since, so that's, 103 years they've been a Football League club. Their first real successful spell when they're in the top flight is between 1979 and 1983. That includes an FA Cup final. But it's between 97 and 2011 that their problems, their financial issues and their stadium problems have a massive impact on the history of this football club, which we'll now discuss in great detail. So their old ground was called the Goldstone Ground, and by the late 90s the club's declined from a first division side in the late 70s and early 80s, where they make that FA Cup final in 1983, to what is now League Two, the old Division 4. They are really struggling financially, their attendances aren't great, and they're right at the foot of the table. They survive on the last day of the season on goal difference, and Hereford go down. But it's at the end of the 96-97 season that the ownership sell their home ground, the Goldstone Ground. And there have been rumours about a potential sale for quite some time. Fans are very unhappy with this. There's a protest movement against ownership. After the sale goes through, the club doesn't get a lot of the money of the sale of the ground and the land surrounding it, which leads to massive financial difficulties for the next decade and a half. Oh yes, lots of problems. They don't have a permanent home ground. So for the next 2 seasons, they're forced to ground share with Gillingham. Gillingham's in Kent. Brighton's in Sussex, technically East Sussex if you want to go by official counties. That's quite a distance of about, 40, 50, 60 miles, something like that. It's not like it's next door. It's like Fulham when they had to ground share with QPR when, their stadium was being refurbished for a brief period. This is quite a distance. And they ground shared the Priestfield Stadium in Gillingham for 2 seasons, before they used the Whitdean Stadium, which is an athletic stadium, which is not designed as a football stadium, and there was much derision aimed at Brighton fans and the club for the use of that stadium. It was not particularly well loved by Brighton fans either. It was a sort of a term of shame going to the Whitdean on a match day weekend. I've been past the Whitdean actually in Brighton. It's a fantastic athletics facility, absolutely. There's no doubt it serves its role really well as a track and field athletic stadium, fantastically. Football stadium, it is not. The capacity was very limited, which meant limited gate receipts, which meant increasing debt. They still owed fees for the ground share at Priestfield in Gillingham, which cost the club money, and they had reduced match day receipts, which again cost the club revenue, which meant debts kept accumulating. But finally, in 2011, they have a permanent home at the Falmer Stadium, otherwise known as the Amex. They move in 2011, and it's from 2017 till now that they have been a Premier League club, and a very well established Premier League club. And they're looking pretty good this season for a European spot, and they could do very well in the FA Cup. They're having a very good season so far this season as I'm recording this video. Last season in the 2021-2022 season, they finished 9th, so they're slowly working their way up the Premier League ladder, and they're looking a pretty handy side at this time. Graham Potter built a great team, basically, before moving to Chelsea. Now, their records and honours, I found some of their honours. Obviously, FA Cup runners-up in the 82-83 season, the last time they had a spell in the top flight. That final went to replay against Manchester United, so they could have won the FA Cup in the same season. They were relegated from the top flight. And another curious thing they won, before they were a Football League club, they won the Charity Shield in 1910. So they do actually have a piece of major silverware in their trophy cabinet. Other than that, they've not been a very successful club. They've been a pretty solid side. The mid to late 90s until the 2010s, obviously the financial difficulties, that lack of a home stadium and the financial struggles off the field did impact the team on their journey back to the top flight, but now they're established as a top flight side, and they've had a couple of FA Cup semi-finals in there. They're a pretty decent side. Hopefully maybe they win the FA Cup this season and then the trajectory of the club changes. The rivalries are interesting because they're where they're based. They have no real local rivals. Crystal Palace, and I'll discuss that rivalry and how it actually comes about, because a lot of people have actually asked me about the rivalry with Palace. And I'll discuss the Palace one. Southampton and Portsmouth. That's it, really. And even Southampton and Portsmouth Are they rivals, really? Because fans of Southampton and Portsmouth, they have their own rivalry, and the rivalry with Bournemouth as well. They're not really. Brighton are in the middle of like a footballing wilderness, really. It's cricket country. It's cricket country. Kent and Sussex are cricket counties. So they really are in the footballing wilderness, really, with no real local rivals to speak of. Now, the Crystal Palace rivalry dates back to the 1970s, and the rivalry between the managers of both clubs. So, Alan Mullery, former England international and a very, very good player as well, is the Brighton manager at the time, and a young Terry Venables is the Crystal Palace manager at the time. And there was a war of words between the two managers. It was a very intense rivalry because they were fighting for promotion up the Football League pyramid. Mansfield Town, obviously, becomes champions, I think, of the third division of the season that this war of words begins. The other two clubs get promoted as well, and in the following season, again, there's a promotion battle, and the war of words begins. It goes into the media, local and national, and it sort of ignites a bit of a rivalry between the two sides. They have met very, very regularly since these two men were managers of both clubs. And it has sort of manifested itself in the more modern day in the Premier League and formerly Championship as well, when the clubs were both in the Championship, because both sides sort of are competing on that edge of that, European spaces. They've both been to FA Cup semi-finals, and there is a rivalry between the two clubs and the set of fans to a certain extent. It is known as the A23 and the M23 rivalry because of the main roads that link the coast of Sussex with South London, and they pass by both stadiums, really. So there is that. And so that's where that rivalry begins. I've been asked about the rivalry between Palace and Brighton. Not a lot of people know that. It was actually down to the managers having a war of words and heated exchanges on the touchline and in the media in the mid-70s. So there you go. So really, there's a brief history of Brighton and Hove Albion. Not a lot to talk about. Their stadium issues sort of mirror what happened to Charlton Athletic and to a certain extent Wimbledon Football Club. And I honestly believe the stadium issues that Brighton faced gave strength to the MK Dons ownership in the moving of Wimbledon FC to Milton Keynes because of the stadium issue. They I think gained a bit of strength from the fact that Brighton and Hove Albion didn't really sort out their stadium problems and also had to ground share with another club. And I think the situation with Charlton as well, I think, added further strength to the Football League and the ownership of Pete Winkleman of the then Wimbledon FC to move their club. So I've sort of linked it into some other club histories there. But Brighton Hove Albion, now established as a Premier League side, pretty solid Premier League side. They've got some good players, good manager, and Charity Shield winners in 1910 and FA Cup runners-up in 82-83. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.